All right, welcome to episode 13 of the Rent Roll podcast, your podcast on all things rental housing. And today is going to be fun, or at least I think so. I'm biased. I think they're all fun. I'll give you that. But this is going to be special. It's about the merging worlds of multifamily and SFR. And I've got with me today, going to be joining me in studio, somebody who knows this topic almost better than anybody, probably. Fred Tuomi, formerly of Equity Residential, Starwood Waypoint, Invitation Homes, now the vice chairman of real estate at Pretium, a company that's really on the front lines of this through its ownership of Progress Residential on the SFR side and BH Management on the apartment side, combined more than 200,000 rental homes under management. And so a lot of focus right now. We're seeing interest in both sectors. They're really complementary each other. They cater to different demographics for the most part. There's some similarities, obviously, but generally a little bit different age groups and life stages. But they've historically managed very separately. And so I think we're under kind of the early stages of a change where we're going to see more of this SFR and multifamily being managed more under one roof and with some synergies that are in place. Obviously, the build to rent segment, BTR, is helping lead this, but I think we're going to see more of that. So today I'm not going to do as much. I'm not going to spend as much time on the usual segments like here's a chart and good question and complaints department. I'll do a little bit, but I'm going to spend as much time as possible for the interview. Typically, I like to have shorter interviews, 20 to 30 minutes. Want to be sensitive to everybody's time, just a little bit different. But my conversation with Fred was we just couldn't stop ourselves. It was a good conversation, and I hope you'll enjoy hearing from him. Before we jump in, a quick plug for our sponsor, Madera Residential. Check them out, maderaresidential.com. All right, so here's a chart. A couple charts today, and with Fred being our guest, we're going to do a couple things on SFR that really debunk some common myths. So one of the big ones, of course, is this idea that single-family rental companies are driving up home prices, taking away availability, impacting home ownership. The reality is home ownership has been going up over these last 8 or so years, and part of it's because of this chart you see here. The U.S. is adding 4 times more homeowners than renters since 2015. This is data from the census, by the way, that analyzes showing you the growth in owner-occupied units versus renter-occupied units. We've added more than 12 million owner-occupied units. That doesn't mean new construction, by the way. That means an owner-occupant moving into that unit. So in many cases, SFR units being converted into for-sale owner-occupied units. So that's from 2015 to the end of 2023. We added more than 12 million of those. At the same time, we only added 2.8 million renter-occupied units. And we know a lot of that's been apartments alone. And so I think that we've probably have seen net negative movement on the SFR side, contrary to what a lot of people think. So what is the real issue? Well, this chart will show you that U.S. is adding new homeowners faster than new for-sale homes. What you'll see is that in most years since 2015, we're adding more homeowners than we're adding new for-sale homes being built, right? And so that's the real challenge. When you add new homeowners faster than new for-sale homes, you're gonna put a crunch on inventory, and that's gonna put upward pressure on pricing. That's why these SFR companies are not buying much scattered site off the MLS anymore. The value's not there. And that's why we still could see upward pressure on home prices, even in today's high interest rate environment. It's just supply and demand. All right, rental housing trivia. Today's question is, what 2 SFR companies merged in 2015 to create Starwood Waypoint, which 2 years later merged with Invitation Homes? All right, so give that one some thought. We will answer that one in a bit. But first, in the news. So we got 3 headlines we're going to review from the week. First one comes from CNBC. More Americans are living in malls as developers get creative to help ease the housing crisis. Let me read a little bit from the article. It says at least 192 malls plan to add housing to their footprint as of January 2022. And at least, and by the way, this article just came out. I'm not sure why it said January 2022, but still, that's a good data point. And at least 33 had constructed apartments since the pandemic began. Dozens more apartment projects are underway in California, Florida, Arizona, and Texas. It says the trend not only helps chip away at the housing shortage in the U.S., but also brings people closer to the remaining retail and restaurant spaces in shopping centers. So thereby hopefully bringing some more life back into some of these malls. I've always loved this concept, and I just don't get why more developers didn't do this originally back decades ago when these malls get built. You have built-in customers for your retail and restaurants. So love this idea. I think it's a win-win, obviously, in the right locations where it could pencil out. Next headline comes from a housing advocacy group called Pro Housing Pittsburgh, and it's a paper, an academic paper called "The Effects of Inclusionary Zoning on New Housing Construction in Pittsburgh." So this just came out. Saw this on social media, posted last week. December 3rd is the date of the paper. Now it's about Pittsburgh, but I think these takeaways apply all over the country. Let me read a little bit from it. It says Pittsburgh's inclusionary zoning mandate in Lawrenceville neighborhood has reduced housing production by 32% since 2019. Extending inclusionary zoning citywide in its current form would increase prices and harm affordability. And it says, if IZ policies lead to housing production shifting out of Pittsburgh and into other metropolitan areas, the accompanying reduction in housing supply has the potential to drive rent and home price increases, ultimately creating the most harm for the lowest income renters and buyers. So the issue here is that while we definitely need more affordable housing, it's the old lesson of Econ 101, which is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything comes at a cost. So in this case, there's more and more evidence, there's abundant evidence showing that lesser housing gets built when inclusionary zoning is in place. And in turn, lesser supply leads to more upward pressure on rents. So we do need a lot more affordable housing. Absolutely. Please don't mishear me on that. We need more. But there are better ways to get affordable housing built than by inclusionary zoning. And number two, inclusionary zoning just requires higher rents on the market rate units, which then makes it harder to pencil out, which is why less gets built. You're looking at potentially having to have rents that are above market in some cases, which means that your renters, even if they can afford it, are going to choose better value elsewhere. And the next headline is actually a tweet or an X post, whatever you call them these days. This one comes from the U.S. Senator, or one of the U.S. Senators from Minneapolis, Tina Smith. It references a 2023 article in the Financial Times, but this tweet just came out last week, and I thought it was a great one. She wrote, "So proud of the great work happening in Minneapolis, which shows that boosting housing supply helps make more homes affordable." And the chart shows that Minneapolis has built more housing than other Midwestern cities, about 50 plus new dwelling approvals per 1,000 people compared to other cities in the Midwest, which were in the call it 15 to 30 range. And the impact shows it's reaping the rewards as rents fall relative to inflation. So it's the only one of the Midwest cities in this study, at least, where median rent fell in terms of real wages or real term change in rent. So meaning, I should rephrase that, the rents did not grow as fast as overall inflation. So that's a great story just about the overall impact of supply. Unfortunately, remember that supply is coming down right now. So from the public policy side, that's a challenge for investors. That's a large part of the thesis right now. So supply is always part of the solution. It works. Back to our trivia question of the week. What two SFR companies merged in 2015 to create Starwood Waypoint, which 2 years later merged with Invitation Homes? All right, so today's trivia question is going to lead us right in to the interview with today's guest, Fred Tuomi. So the answer is Starwood Waypoint Residential Trust merged with Colony American Homes in 2015. And that's how we got what became Starwood Waypoint once it was renamed, but Colony American Homes was the other big player in that. Fred, our guest today, he was the CEO at Colony American and became the CEO at Starwood Waypoint when this merger happened. And then 2 years later, when they merged with Invitation Homes, Fred stayed on again as the CEO of the new Invitation Homes. And back in that time, Dallas Tanner, who's the current CEO of Invitation Homes, he was the chief investment officer. And so Fred later retired from Invitation Homes before getting lured back into the industry. Of course, couldn't stay away, retired from equity residential before that, and then spent about a decade plus working for these emerging institutional SFR companies. And today is the vice chairman of real estate at Pretium. Just some quick background. Pretium is a big player, as I mentioned earlier, in both multifamily and SFR. 85,000 homes managed through Progress Residential, its SFR primary unit, and then earlier this year, acquired apartment manager BH Management, which manages about 110,000 apartment units, nearly 50,000 of those are owned. The remainder are third-party managed. So combined, it's more than 200,000 units under being managed under Pretium. As I noted earlier, historically, SFR and multifamily have been managed very separately. That's starting to change. I know it's a big focus for Fred at Pretium. We're talking to him about what that looks like. And, he's somebody who's uniquely qualified to do this. He worked under Sam Zell at Equity Residential on the apartment side. I'll be talking to him about some Sam Zell stories. You'll enjoy that. And then, again, going on to manage some of the helping scale. Really, back in the old days, people thought that you could, not even that old ago, 15 years ago, people thought you couldn't scale SFR management. He proved that you could. He's going to share with us how he did that. So let's jump into the interview with Fred. All right, now welcome into the interview portion of today's podcast, and I am absolutely thrilled and honored to welcome in Fred Tuomi, formerly Equity Residential, Invitation Homes, and several other things now with Pretium. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right, so you have played, I know you're a very humble guy, but I'll brag on you a little bit. You played a huge role in the maturation of rental housing into an institutional mainstream asset class in your career, first with multifamily, later with SFR. So let's start with multifamily. How did you end up in multifamily and eventually working your way into working with Sam Zell at Equity Residential?
Oh, wow. It's been a great career. I love the business, but I had no idea what it was. And like most people in multifamily business, fell into it.
Right. We all did.
Yeah, we all did. And so how I got into it actually was kind of through the back door. Bottom up. I was a computer geek way back when in the late 70s. And that was before it was cool.
Yeah.
And before everybody was becoming billionaires. But I loved technology back then. So I got a degree in information systems, a computer science degree. And I started working while I was still in college, actually, because there was such a shortage. Nobody had to do it. And there were no young kids in it. So I was kind of an anomaly. So I started developing a career in, as a software engineer. And I got a job with the Federal Reserve Bank and actually worked on and developed the very first electronic funds transfer program.
Wow.
Because back then, all these wires and wire transfers of securities were done on paper with runners. So we automated all that, wrote the world's largest COBOL program, most of it in assembly language. But anyway, from there to healthcare, automated hospitals, and then a very, very, very forward-thinking visionary in the multifamily business, a guy named John Lee Nielsen and his partner George Lane out of Atlanta. They had a company called Johnstown American, and they were growing like crazy because apartments were becoming popular for tax purposes back then. And he had this idea of like these things called computers are going to be useful someday. And instead of keeping them in the basement, just running green bar sheets of paper for ledgers and financial statements, they're going to be used by people. So it was fascinating. Now looking back, he had that vision. So he wanted to develop a system to automate property operations on site. Never thought of before.
Yeah. And
I was just this young kid. I was working for a consulting firm then, developing financial models. It was called Computer Science Corporation, which is a big consulting firm out of LA, still around today. So I got the job to like go talk to this guy, and I didn't know anything about anything. Long story short is we developed this complete end-to-end automated system for apartment management. And they sent me out there. I interviewed property managers, maintenance techs, leasing agents, bookkeepers, accountants, marketing people. I learned the business from the inside out, and I put it all down on paper and designed this like structure and with diagrams of how you could do this on a computer. And then boom, they went for it. And we did a joint venture with IBM, developed it, hired some programmers. I wrote a bunch of the code myself. And then next thing we know, we had it on a couple 100,000 apartments.
That's amazing.
Then we sold it to our competitors. And then we ended up selling the system to RealPage, Steve Wynn, which turned it into RealPage. And that's the core of the RealPage system today.
So this was the old rent roll then?
Yeah, it wasn't rent roll. It was RealPage, and the name is a whole nother story. I named it. It was called Little Buddy.
Oh yes,
because all the old managers, it basically everybody in the public they were afraid of computers.
Yeah.
So we said, well, we have to make it friendly. So we had a little dummy, a little image of it, this little guy.
Yeah.
He's your buddy.
Yeah.
Is this going to help you get your job done during the day? So we made it very easy to use, very user-friendly, but we had to know. So I learned all the interconnections of the business, how they relate, how they flow through that project.
So that was Steve's first company, right? That he sold off and then kept Little Buddy and started RealPage.
And that started RealPage, yeah.
That alone was a great story because when he sold his first company, an accounting software company,
Yeah.
The buyer, I don't remember, it was Thomson Reuters or something like that, said they don't want Little Buddy, and he turns that into a $12 billion company. So yeah,
yeah, it is. So we get together every now and then to talk about that. It's money. He still has one of those little dolls we made.
Yeah.
So then I had to make the decision: do I stay with technology, or do I stay with the visionary, John Lee Nielsen, who was my mentor at the time?
Yeah.
And I just really liked him, and he liked me, and he would, he'd always work late at night, and I would be there with him. And I said, sure, I'm going to stay with him. So he taught me the business, and he gave me a portfolio right away to run, which was unbelievable that he did that.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of went on from there.
Yeah. So at what point did Equity Residential get part of the picture?
Okay, so Johnstown, we actually grew to like 300,000 units. We had 225 or 250,000 apartments, and then about 100,000 condos that we managed. So it was huge. The Tax Reform Act of '86 came and blew it up. It was massive. It was bigger than, the impact was as big or bigger than the GFC. So that destroyed the industry. So then we all went into fee management. So I built a formidable fee management company that still exists today, Ram Partners.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Host Properties in Atlanta at that time wanted to get into the fee business. They were kind of dabbling with the idea. So they asked me to join them and kind of grow it. So I did, and it was awesome because then with the backing of the Post name and reputation and our scrappy little fee management company, we were able to really do some cool things. So we grew that to a fee management powerhouse within the South and East and Southwest United States. And then Post went public, and I wasn't too happy with how they kind of carved it up, the ownership. So I was a little disappointed in that. And then a friend of mine lived in Chicago. He said, hey, come visit us in Chicago. And at that time, I was married, had a few kids, living in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife and her whole entire family were, South and Central Georgians. I'd never been above the Mason-Dixon line. And so we went to Chicago on a lark just to visit friends for Thanksgiving. We had never done anything like that before. And a snowstorm came, got snowed in.
Wow.
So I got stuck there for a few days. So I said, what am I going to do in Chicago? So I called one of my fee management clients, a guy named Alan George, the best asset manager, best investor in the world.
Yeah.
And he was working for Zell. I said, I'm going to give old Alan a call. So I did, and he said, well, come on down to our office at lunch. And back then they had a chef in the office, and they'd have executive lunches every day. And so I got to join him. I sat next to Doug Crocker, who was the CEO of Equity Residential. We hit it off. And then he started bugging me like the next week. I went back to Atlanta. He started calling me and said, you're coming to work for us. I said, no freaking way. I'm not going to Chicago. It's cold there.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, I'm going to Chicago.
Yeah.
There was such a great opportunity I saw is, EQR was becoming public and what the plan was to be big and national, and this whole REAP thing, transformational to the industry. I didn't want to move to Chicago, and my family, but I didn't want anyone else to have this opportunity.
Sure.
So I went for it.
Yeah. So this journey from pre-1986 to Tax Act changes, what was the perception, and then early years after that, with before we saw the maturation of some of these REITs like Equity Residential, what was the perception of multifamily back when you first started, and what milestones did you see along the way that really helped advance multifamily as an asset class?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because during the tax days, there were some large companies. There was consolidation. And like anything else, if you don't have a real business, it was just built for tax purposes. It wasn't sustainable. So it blew up. So what the industry kind of fell back to its original roots, which it was pretty much, highly fragmented, decentralized. It was a club business. Every town had a couple real estate people, and they would go to the country club and raise money, from the country club guys, the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers. And so they would raise money, for a property at a time through a limited partnership. And so it's pretty much a cottage industry, look very local, very small. So the catalyst for the consolidation and the institutionalization of the business really was the formations of the REITs. That's where Sam comes in. Because Sam was really the godfather, the grandfather, maybe a little bit of both, of the REIT business. He saw that. And he called it the liquefaction of real estate, meaning he turns it into a liquid security.
Yeah.
So anybody can invest in it, and you know what it's worth every day, and you can divest it, all or partial. And it was great for, wealth planning, for, estate planning. But one of the other benefits to the real estate sponsors was they're getting off massive amounts of personally guaranteed debt. So I think that was one of the motivations for some of these larger groups to go public. So once they did, then they realized a lot of the benefits, raising capital. Instead of having to have a mortgage for each asset and take a lot of time and effort and paperwork and process, you could raise money in Wall Street overnight and get, several $100 million, at very low cost capital. So the equity at that time was cheap, and the debt that you could access was a lot cheaper than you could, and much more efficient than you could any other way. So that set off the whole trend for, REITs, and of all types, not just multifamily. And that was very good for the business, totally transformed it. We had bigger bases, bigger capital, access to capital. We could grow, we could professionalize, we could hire the best people. We'd had resources that we never had before. You could have marketing strategies and maintenance strategies and acquisition, process. We could just professionalize everything. So it was great to build careers, attract people, retain people, compensate people, and build a big business. So it was just a blast.
Yeah.
So I joined Sam when Equity Residential had maybe 4,000 units. It was just a ragtag portfolio of his old stuff and Barry Sternlicht's kind of that he got from the RTC. Mashed those two together. Barry was on our board. He was such a young guy back then. And to see the interplay between he and Sam was just fantastic for me. And then we just built it. So I was the president of the property management group. I didn't know what that meant. So we started opening offices, hiring people, building culture, building systems, and Doug Crocker used to tell me, we're going to load the truck. He said, don't worry about anything. We're just going to load the truck. You be ready for it.
Yeah.
So we built the infrastructure and hired some great people that are there, still there today.
It's amazing. Yeah, quite a legacy. So before we move on from Sam Zell, I got to ask you, a lot of people who are, my age and younger, they've seen him on, the quotes. I mean, he was famous for coining terms like stay alive till 95. And then after the GFC, it was be clean till 13. And here we are at survive till 25. So his legacy continues with these catchphrases. Obviously a big icon in the multifamily space. So are there any great Sam Zell stories you can share?
Oh, there's many great Sam Zell stories, most of which I can't share. Do you have a warning label or a rating label on this show? He was a colorful person, and I always admired that about Sam. For the very first time I met him, he's his own person, and he's not going to change for anything or anybody.
Yeah,
and that created some friction. It created some problems, but he didn't see that. He just said, he would tell you what he thought.
Yeah.
First time I ever met him, one of our management offices, shook his hand and he said, "Oh, I hear lots of good things about you." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Don't thank me." He said, "I'll make up my own mind." He said, "That's what other people are saying." I said, "Okay." But the first week I was there, I went to a big conference. I think it may have been a ULI conference in Chicago. And so I left the office, went down there. Sam was talking. There were 750 people in the room, giant ballroom. And so he was the keynote speaker. And, somebody asked him. So he told his story. And he had a very humble beginning, but aggressive. And he went to law school and he hated law. And so that whole story you can read. And then he just got into Sam mode. And he said, "So here I am today, standing in front of all of you and y'all call me a effing legend. So I'm like, oh my God, this is the guy I'm going to work for. And then he just went on from there. And he would always tell the most filthy jokes in any setting.
Oh no.
Board meeting with mixed company, a room full of 700 people, he didn't care. And they were funny, but totally inappropriate.
Right. A different era, right?
And then our employee meetings, they would have to say, we want to have Sam come to the next employee rally. And we literally have a few hundred to several hundred people at our employee rallies later. And I said, oh no, we don't want Sam. But he came 2 times I can remember, and we had a whole lineup of lawyers and HR people in the back ready for the fallout. And then one more other early Sam story that kind of made me really realize, he's his own guy, but he's passionate and he gets things done. We went to New York, and I was very new to the environment. So they said, you come with us. So I went to New York, and we went to Moody's, the rating agency.
Yeah.
And they were just starting to, think about rating these new things called apartment REITs.
Yeah.
But he didn't like their first report and how they were looking at the valuations and the ratings. Actually, not the valuations, but the ratings. So he said, they have it all wrong. We're going to go there and set them straight. So we go to Moody's, the big old office in New York, paneled walls. Everybody shows up in these, blue suits, white shirt, red ties, wingtips polished, spit polished. Sam was wearing like a black leather jacket.
Yeah. True to himself, right?
True to himself. And I'm pretty sure I wore a coat and tie, although that was frowned upon within Equity Residential. So then we're sitting there right prim and proper. All of a sudden, Sam just comes unglued, pushes the chair back to the wall, stands up, leans over the table, pounds the table, and starts cussing at him. And said, you blankety blanks, just don't blankety blank, get it? I'm telling you. And then we left. I was like, oh my God. That's the end of the company.
Right.
Sure enough, in 2 weeks, Moody's right in line with his thinking.
Wow.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah. It was shock, but then they thought about it and go like, damn, he's right. Because you can't bully Moody's.
Right.
But
They made him rethink it, though.
made him rethink it. So many, many funny stories. Management didn't always agree with him. And one case he proposed at a board dinner one time, I think we need to bring in a consulting firm and rethink our business from the top to the bottom. And we were riding high then. We're like, what are you talking about? We're the best. We have this figured out. We're the most efficient. We have the lowest cost. We have the best rent growth. I mean, we're killing the competition. Everything's going great. You say we suck? He said, yeah, you suck. So we all said, no, we don't need it. All we're going to do is spend a bunch of money, and they're going to come in and ask us a bunch of questions, give us a report with what we tell them.
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay. No. He said, you're all a bunch of idiots. We're doing this. And sure enough, he was right. We hired Bain, and after several months, they just showed us things and taught us things that we had no idea, and came up with some new ways to do and look at and perform the business. Pricing, delivery maintenance, customer service, analyzing the customer, net promoter scores. And it advanced us 5 years, more and more. And those methodologies exist today, and now they're pretty much industry standard.
Right. No, yeah.
So again, he was brilliant, and we totally disagreed, and ended up it was for our own good.
Right. Well, it's brave of you to disagree.
Yeah. Well, you could always disagree. He didn't like yes people.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So one more question about EQR days. I got to ask you, do you feel any you've obviously moved on from EQR a while now, but do you feel any deja vu when you're looking at EQR now? They're re-entering places like Texas and Florida after famously exiting some of these states.
Yeah. At one point we were in 40 states.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And but then we looked at ourselves one day and said, no, we're going to become the commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to be the index. We want to outperform. So the first level was we got rid of, properties in Alabama, Oklahoma, and we stayed within more traditional, the Sun Belt, the Smile, and up the East Coast, and up Pacific Northwest and Colorado. And again, this is the same thing. One day at a board meeting, he says, we need to sell everything except the gateway cities. And we were like, what? And he said, I've been thinking. He said, the value of real estate is you want to own irreplaceable assets in 24-hour gateway cities. All these other little southeast, southwest desert towns, so it's just commodity. And you're going to be fighting new development. You're going to be fighting the competitors, and there's nothing special about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, whoa. We had to spend all these years building up this huge portfolio. And people in property management have what I call property management disease. They assess themselves, their own worth, based on the number of units.
Right.
I heard that just a couple of days ago. And it's not about that. It's value.
Sure.
So we did it. And I remember one day we sold everything we owned in Jacksonville, Florida, which is, I think, 3,500 units or something,
Oh, wow.
to buy one building in New York.
Yeah. It's a nice building, though.
It is a nice building. Now, some of them are not so nice, but when you see the financial statements, they're very nice.
Yeah.
California, we didn't feel good about investing in California because the per unit costs were so high. He said, you guys are a bunch of idiots. You need to buy everything you can get in California. And so we did. I remember they were like $286,000 a unit, one deal. It was like, oh, we can never pay that. Well, we blew right through that in terms of valuations later on. So, yeah. So he was always able to see over the horizon.
Yeah.
The EOP story is another great one. If we had an hour or more, like tell you the EOP story, it was fascinating. And I wasn't even directly involved, but he would talk about it at the board meetings. And the chess game between he and John Gray, you could write a book. I think there may be a book on it.
I want to read that.
So anyway, he drove us to that decision, and it worked because our number of assets went down. Revenue, I think, stayed about the same because of high rents, but our valuation and our multiple went up.
Yeah.
So he was right. So that was a good move for us, and it stopped for a decade or more.
Yeah.
And now, Sam's gone. And I see equity residential buying in Atlanta, buying in Denver, buying in Dallas.
Yep.
So we're like, oh, okay, deja vu all over again. But that's where the growth is today. It'd be very interesting to see what Sam would say about that now.
Sure, it would be. I'd love it.
If he would have allowed that. We should have a seance with him sometime.
Yeah.
But
also, in fairness, I mean, some of the ones that they're re-entering are much bigger, more mature markets than they were 20 years ago.
Yes. So if you still use somewhat the same, philosophy, buy in the core, not out in the boonies, buy an irreplaceable, great asset, in a trophy asset in a great location, in a vibrant city that people are going to want to live in.
Right.
So, and I think that's what they're doing. So I would never underestimate the strategy of, their investment group.
Yeah. No, they've and core, but also some pretty prime suburban locations. So it's not just the cities. It's these irreplaceable suburbs that are oftentimes the hardest to build in.
Yeah, and they're cities in their own.
Yeah.
The total lifestyle right there.
Yeah. So let's move on to after your time from EQR. If I recall the story correctly, you were planning to retire and have some downtime. Then you got a call recruiting you to head up this crazy idea of building out an institutional single-family rental platform. So why did you say yes? And tell us about that call.
Yeah, saying I'd rather be lucky than good, or be in the right place at the right time. That's the story of my life. I truly am the luckiest guy in the world. A number of friends. So yeah, I had a great run, equity residential, and I still love all the people in my time there, and we built a great thing. But I knew it was time to go. And my mentor and good friend to this day, Jerry Spector, was my boss. And he's ahead of me, and he said the same thing at one point. He said, you guys don't need me. He said, I can sit here and occupy space and time, but I don't want to block you guys. I totally
It's a great leader.
love him and respect him for them. So then a few years later, I had the same epiphany. I was like, damn, all I'm doing is I'm going to our employee rallies and whipping up the crowd, telling stories. I'm doing earnings calls and conferences and investor meetings. And that's about it. I'm not needed for anything else because I had built such a great team, and they were much younger than I was, and they're so good. I wasn't needed. and someone else could do all those things, which is now Michael Manellis. So, and then, my family was kind of putting down roots in California. My two daughters were married to two wonderful guys who live in San Diego. We had a home out there. So my wife was saying like, hey, so I did it. So I retired. And then after 2 weeks, I was shaving like once a week. I'd go to the grocery store every day.
Yeah.
I took over the household. I was doing the laundry.
Yeah.
And I actually left it by like, is this really what I'm going to be spending the rest of my time doing? And then as fate had it, I get a phone call and said, hey, would you go up to LA and see this guy named Tom Barrick with Colony Capital? And I remembered them because we'd bought a really cool asset from them in Marina Del Rey, years ago. So I said, sure. And I don't know if you've ever met Tom Barrick, but he's a very charismatic, great, another vision. I've been so blessed in my life to work with the most, powerful and wonderful and smart visionaries in real estate.
Yeah.
The original guy, John Lee Nielsen, a lot of people don't know him, but back in the day, he was that. And George Lane, and then Sam Zell, and then Tom Barrick, and then Barry Sternlight, and then John Gray, and now Don Mullen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, it's big names.
Big names. And I've been directly working with them. It's like I have to pinch myself, just to be in the room. And I could tell you all great stories about all these great men. But anyway, Tom Barrick called. It was an office, and he can like, you immediately just want to run through the wall for the guy. So he said, yeah, we're buying all these homes. We raised $1 billion equity. We're leveraging it. We're buying homes like crazy. But he said, but we don't know what the hell we're doing. So he told me, I said, so he said, what should we do? I said, well, you need to hire somebody who knows what to do. You need to hire somebody like me, who's built something like this and knows what you do every morning, what you do every afternoon, what you do every night, what you do every week, every month, every quarter, every year, and how to run a railroad. He said, someone like you. So you kind of know what happened.
He said, right into it.
He said, would you do it? I said, oh, shit. It's very tempting, but oh my God, I already got my life set up. My wife would kill me. But I said, okay, I'll do it for a year. And then that was that. Never looked back. So we built Colony American, and then we merged with Barry Sternlicht's, and there's multiple stories in all of these, to create Starwood Waypoint.
Yep.
And then so then I had in my board, I had Barry Sternlicht, and I had Tom Barrick, and then their cadre of partners, and that was chaotic.
I'm sure.
It's so much fun for me just to watch, and trying to run a board meeting with an agenda with those guys. But yeah, I'd always have a board book and I'd have an agenda, and then it was just like thrown out.
That's great.
So we thought for this industry, we could see it forming.
Yeah.
Because underneath, we had finally figured out how to manage it.
Yeah.
And we could control it, and we can influence and report on the results. And I saw it every day crystallizing and getting better and better and better. Primarily because I started hiring multifamily people. So they said, well, how can we really take this to the next level? I said, well, we need to merge with Invitation Homes, to the Blackstone Group. And I know John Barthling very well. We would get together, we would compare notes, we would share ideas. I said, well, there's no way that Barrick, Sternlicht, and John Gray would ever agree to anything. Well, we had one meeting in New York at the Blackstone office, one afternoon, boom.
Wow.
Handshake. And then we put the pedal in the metal and fast tracked, and the next thing you know, they asked me to stay on and be the CEO. I was blessed for that.
But just real quick, how did they get a handshake out of each other in one meeting in New York for those guys?
I don't know. Everybody said it could never happen.
Yeah.
But they, it was surreal because they're all very humble, very, complimentary to each other, but they all saw the same vision.
Yeah.
So you had three visionaries, three powerful real estate moguls, icons.
Yeah.
But they all saw the same vision. They said, this has to happen.
Right.
We need to have a a $20 billion company in this space to make it legitimate and to really bust through.
Yeah. So that takes us kind of building on something you just mentioned then. So back in the earlier days, as you're starting this, the view was that you could never scale property management in SFR. It was a mom and pop business. It wasn't scalable. And so you mentioned hiring some multifamily people, but obviously it's still a little bit of a different business. So what was it like trying to overcome that hurdle, and what ended up being the secret formula to making it work?
People used to say the same thing about multifamily. They say, oh, you big REITs, you can never outperform the locals.
Yeah.
They used to call them the local sharpshooters.
Yeah.
Everybody said, well, local sharpshooters will eat your lunch. We thought, okay, just wait. So we had to do that. We had to prove the case in the multifamily business. So single family, the main reason I agreed to do it is because I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I had already retired. I had time on my hands, and I didn't need the money, and so why not?
Yeah.
It could be fun. It could be a total disaster. If it blows up, I could say, well, that I was part of the experience. It was kind of fun to watch it blow up, but it was a challenge. So even Sam Zell would publicly say, it's a bunch of baloney. It's a great trade. You'll never make it a business. In fact,
Amazing.
About a year or two into it, Sam and I were on the same panel at a conference in New York, and kind of got into it a little bit, but I would always defer to Sam.
Right.
I thought, okay. But so we ended up proving that it could be done. How did we do it? First step was, we were so chaotic. I mean, we had no systems. It was all a bunch of boxes of keys, a room full of people, spreadsheets, just nothing.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we need a system. So I talked to RealPage. I talked to Entrada about, hey, will you modify your system to operate single family? It's basically the same business. The P&L statements were identical.
Yeah.
P&Ls are identical. So I think, okay, if the P&L is identical, we should be able to have the same systems to run these businesses. And then any differences or nuances, but they had no interest. So then Yardi stepped up and said they were going to do it. They kind of faked it. So that's why today most SFR companies are using Yardi. And it's gotten better, but boy, in the early days, it was brutal trying to use that and work with the company. So we didn't have systems, we didn't have anything. So the first step was to get order. I needed people who know what order is, because it was primarily populated by people who had no real estate experience. They were just analysts or portfolio guys or acquisitions people inside these private equity firms. Said, here, you go buy real estate. Or it was relying on former home builders and local real estate brokers, like sales and agents. And they were great, but no sense of like financial responsibility and discipline.
Yeah.
So we would have these leasing ladies that would go around and then once every 10 days stop by the office and say, oh, I got a cardboard box here with a bunch of leases that were signed. So we never knew what our occupancy was or anything. So tons of stories like that. So I said, okay, I need to hire people. So fortunately, timing was that EQR was exiting all of these markets.
Right.
Back to that story. So, EQR just vacated Atlanta. I got a bunch of homes in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Hey, Brad Hall, what you doing?
Yeah.
And then he recruited the next level down, and they recruited their managers and then the maintenance guys, because the property management business, they're loyal to their boss.
Right.
They follow them from company to company. So I was able to assemble some really great talent in Phoenix, in Texas, in Florida, in Georgia, in North Carolina. So I thought, well, it's a lot easier to bring in somebody who knows how to run the business, and teach them nuances of SFR versus take somebody who was selling real estate or brokering it, a transaction person, and teach them how to manage.
Yeah. Whole different skill set.
Totally different skill set, different attitude, different DNA. So that really was the beginning of the crystallization where, hey, I know how many homes I have.
Yeah.
I know what the occupancy is. I know what the availability is. I know what the rent collections are.
Basic things you got to know.
And then the P&L started actually meaning something.
Yeah.
And then we could actually control it. Hey, our exposure's growing. We need more leasing. This is so it was then systems. It was a curse that turned into a blessing. We had no system. I gave up on the legacy system. I said, they're just not going to help us out. Because I talked to YieldStar, I talked to LRO about revenue management. I couldn't get any traction because they said, well, we're not sure you're going to survive. And then some of them had a valid point. They'd say, well, even if SFR business does turn into something, there's only going to be like 3 or 4 players, large enough to write the ticket to use our systems. And that's a valid point. So anyway, we had a blank piece of paper. So we developed our own systems.
Wow.
Deja vu back to the very beginning of my career.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, this is going to be fun. So I hired a great CTO, and he had a great, cadre of fantastic developers, and we just wailed on it. And then through site visits, I would see all the absurd inefficiencies, like just managing doors, locks, keys. The first day I showed up as the new boss in market, it was Phoenix. And I said, we're going to take you on a property tour. I said, I love property tours. Let's go.
Yeah.
It was July. It was freaking, it was hot.
Ugh.
So we go to the first house, standing on out the door. And there's a traditional old rusty lockbox on there. Oh, the code doesn't work.
Oh.
No, I'll call Betty in the back of the office. Voicemail.
Ugh.
I said, don't worry about it. Let's just go to the next one. Go to the next one. Code works. The box opens, no key.
Oh.
So then they start doing the shuffle. I said, okay, maybe the third time would be a charm. Let's go to the next house. And sure enough, it opened. We go in there. It's July in Phoenix. This thing had been vacant for who knows how long. It was like an ice chest inside that home. So I'm like, okay, vacant electricity. So that was the birth of smart homes.
Right.
I went back to the office, talked to Lucas. It was my CTO. I said, Lucas, one of the last deals we bought at EQR was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was developed by a hotel developer, and he put these electronic locks on it. And when we first bought them, we actually underwrote, ripped those locks out, put traditional key locks. But then we operated for a while. Everybody loved it.
Mm.
I said, that exists. He said, yeah, in the short-term rental business, resort business, they use those things.
Yeah.
I said, we need that.
Yeah.
Sure enough, in 2 weeks, he had a working prototype in the office. He said, watch this. His office door, locked, unlocked. Thermostat on his desk, up, down, off, boom. Said, go for it.
Yeah.
I didn't ask anybody. I didn't do an analysis. I didn't do anything. So I want that, go for it. And sure enough, we built it out.
That's amazing.
Then the leasing process was costing us a fortune. So this is not sustainable. So then we tacked. I said, well, shit, if I can open the doors, for vendors and employees, doing the work, I can open it for leasing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need these leasing agents. The residents can open up themselves and show themselves.
Yeah.
So that was the birth of the self-guided tours. The day we put it on our website, we said, if you'd like a self-guided tour, click here. If you'd like to have a guided tour with a sales agent, the leasing agent, click here. 80% of the people went.
Wow.
Right out of the gate, and it never went down. And it was like immediate success. And then we developed a whole leasing process, virtual leasing.
Yeah.
With a call center and text and everything. So it spawned the maintenance. I thought, oh God, maintenance. So how are we ever going to get control of this maintenance thing? So I had we developed a whole roadmap of how to automate the maintenance, dispatch, distribute, intake, dispatch, and the follow-up. And we're starting to develop it. And then through the Pritzker organization, I met a guy named Mike Rothman and his son Alex, who were with SMS company, SMS Assist, who was doing all this facilities management for industrial buildings, shopping centers, and retail stores, and 7-Elevens, and Dollar General, and every Chase Bank branch around the country. So they came to Scottsdale just to brainstorm, and they said, well, this is how we operate commercial.
Yeah.
I said, shit, that's the same thing I need, except for homes. He said, well, we've never done residential. I said, well, let's do it together.
Yeah.
So we co-developed it. And then boom, we proved it out, a little small market. I said, Atlanta, if anything will work in Atlanta, if it works in Atlanta, it'll work anywhere. Because Atlanta's a tough market.
Right.
So we did it, worked beautiful. Well, it was rough at first, but then we finally got it where it's working beautifully, and we went nationwide. And then when we merged, with each merger, it was like, wow, this is great. I had no idea. And so we adopted it, including with Invitation Homes. They didn't like the idea at first. So we had a legion of analysts from New York, from Blackstone, come in and study it. That's like, oh boy.
Wow. They
took like 2 weeks and studied it every way, inside and out. They came back and said, it's the only way to run the business.
Wow.
So to this day, and now that system is now being used by a lot of people. It's called Lesson. Lesson bought SMS.
Okay.
So it spawned a bunch of, so we needed people and we needed process systems, automated processes. And that allowed us to synthesize the business into like a synthetic properties. Because each individual disparate assets was the challenge, is time and space.
Right.
Distance and time. So that was the challenge. So we were going to close that gap through technology. Plus, at that point in time, technology, it was a great time to start this because technology development tools had advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Very sophisticated, very great tools. We could develop stuff very quickly and cheap. Plus, it was native, because the old systems, all these big old REITs had, were developed before the internet.
Yeah.
So the internet came out. I remember that in the early days of ILSs, even in web pages, we had to like jerry rig our systems to work with this thing called the internet. Then mobile became thing, and then they had to rig it again, put more, duct tape and baling wire and chewing gum to make it mobile. So which is, suboptimal. Here we started fresh, native internet, native mobile, native, apps.
Yeah.
So we were able to develop really cool, slick software. Then society, it used to be like you'd shield your customers from your computer systems. Then you'd have to kind of force it on them or trick them to use them because it made you more efficient. Now in society, it was like, they want it.
Right.
Nobody wanted to be chatted up by a leasing agent. They want a self-guided tour.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to have to go to the office and write down, fill out a paper, lease or a paper notice or a paper service ticket.
Yeah. Doing my time, my way.
3:00 in the morning, it doesn't matter, on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so we had all this. We had all of that, and brand new, and the consumers just gravitated to, because that's how they want to do business.
Yeah.
We have to be easy to do business with, efficient to do business with on their terms. Then employees, we're hiring a lot of young people. That's how they run their life.
Yeah.
They don't want to learn the policy and procedure manual.
Yeah.
Give this big 3-ring binder. If I can read this thing,
right,
before your first week on the job. No, they want to figure it on the fly because everything has to be natural to them, just like they use social media, and everything else.
Absolutely.
So we patterned all of our systems. I want for my field employees and my customers to be delighted by the technology we provided.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. And that you definitely seem to describe the secret sauce, because that was obviously a whole different, it was a wild west of leasing, I'm sure, back then.
Yeah, it's the Wild West, but then the timing was perfect. Yeah, everything came together just the right time. And now today, I look at it as like, wow, this whole prop tech, which is really hot right now.
Yeah.
We spawned that industry
Mm-hmm.
because there was no prop tech back then. It was just RealPage and MRI and, Drata and Yardia and the like. Now there's hundreds of really cool new companies being spawned. The SmartRank, Lesson, and dozens more.
You go to prop tech conferences now, there's more vendors than there are people looking for vendors.
Yeah. Oh, the IMN thing. The first time we'd go to show sign of support, and it would be like a ragtag, a couple hundred people there, most of them like local investors who own like one home or 10 homes or something. Now you go to Scottsdale or you go to Miami, there's like 3,000 people there, and every vendor known to man, and it's big time. So
Yeah.
it's very cool.
So let me ask you a related question. So having done multifamily and single family rentals, and it's obviously gotten better in SFR side thanks to things that you've described, but how much more challenging is it to manage 100,000 SFR units versus 100,000 apartment units? If, I just do some easy math here. If your average apartment's 250 units, that's 400 buildings versus 100,000 individual buildings.
Yeah. The individual home is the challenge. It scared a lot of people off, but now no one really thinks about it and actually embraces it. The way I always looked at it was to superimpose a synthetic, reality on top of it that I could comfortably relate to. So when it was like, oh wow, how are we going to handle all this? Well, let's just imagine it was a multifamily property.
Yeah.
Imagine it was a 300 unit. So we would kind of draw a circle around it. As I didn't have an office, but I can have a person responsible for these 300 homes. And that person could have a couple leasing people and a couple maintenance people, and there's a cadre of vendors, and interact with our systems. And then over here, this part of town, we'd have another one, over here, another one. So that's what we did, because I was hiring multifamily people. I would say, give them some concept to grab onto that's familiar. So we basically had, synthetic or virtual, clusters.
Yeah.
Pods or clusters, whatever you want to call them.
And ironically, by the way, now we're doing the multifamily side. So.
Yes, the centralization of multifamily is a big hot topic, although we did it at EQR 15 years ago. But that's a big hot topic right now is how they can, take resources, labor off the properties and leave just a few, and then run, portfolios of properties on a more centralized basis, which is fascinating. It was totally doable. It's the way you should run the business. And I reminds me, I'll know a story. Time after NAREIT, Tom Toomey with UDR called me and said, "What the bleep are you guys doing?" He said, "I want to know everything you're doing." He said, "Because I keep hearing at the NAREIT conference, all these investors and else asking me, why aren't we doing what you're doing?" They would feel good. So we
Actually been trying to since then.
and we invited them. They came to Scottsdale and looked at what, we gave them the whole dog and pony show of exactly what we're doing. And so now they're emulating.
Yeah.
And COVID really accelerated that.
It did.
And technology forward companies like UDR and Essex were already moving that direction, but COVID accelerated it. Like at SmartRent, the sales of smart homes and self-guided tour capabilities skyrocketed during COVID.
Yeah.
Everybody had to scramble to get it done. So the 100 thing, so you basically conceptualize groups. And at first we thought, okay, if we could do 200, and then we said, okay, let's do 300. Because remember, we were buying homes. We were buying 1,000 homes a week sometimes.
Yeah.
But part of our portfolio's development strategy was not just market footprint. It was within a market getting density.
Yeah.
Scale is important. Density is important, so that we could get closer and closer and closer. More efficient, and gives you much more market intel, and the vendors like it. You get more efficient pricing, everything. So then we pushed it to 500 with the same group of labor, and then 750, and then 1,000, and then we got to like 1,100, 1,200. I think now, when I retired from Invitation, I think it was more like 1,300-ish, whereas our optimal, kind of pod size, and now I think it's like up to 1,600. So that's how you do it. Just like how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Break it up. Yeah. So now you've moved on to Pretium, vice chairman of real estate. You're able to, I think they're kind of on the front end of a new trend where we're seeing multifamily and single family rental portfolios coming together.
Right.
And you have this unique background having done both. So these boundary lines between the two sectors are blurring, and we're seeing more synergies between the two. So how do you see multifamily and SFR asset management and operations coming together more and more in coming years?
That's what has me excited right now. That's what keeps me going. And I had actually predicted it years ago. I think it was 2015, even before we were allowed to have a seat at the table at NAREIT. There was a rogue session at the Waldorf in New York that Green Street sponsored, because we weren't official enough to be sanctioned. So they had a rogue session, and it was packed house. There,
Wow.
the people were like in the doorway, and what's the guy's name? Well, one of the Green Street guys was asking me questions about similar things about the SFR business, and then I asked about that, and I said, absolutely. I said, one of these days, you're going to have one company operating both, because it makes no sense to have separate companies, silos, with all that overhead, public company overhead if they're public, duplicated, when at the end of the day, the P&Ls are the same. Student housing, seniors housing, manufactured housing, apartments, single family. Same business, but we're treating them as different sectors. Someday somebody is going to break through that, and you'll have rental real estate.
Yeah.
It's rental real estate, residential real estate. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And then while we were running SFR portfolios, every now and then we'd end up with some townhomes, and the townhomes would be attached. I'd go like, huh. Then BTR said, oh, I can get a little piece of land in a great location, 50 homes on it. How am I going to operate that?
Yeah.
Pretty much like a multifamily. That it was 100 units, that it was 200 units. And now BTR is the bridge. That's going to be maybe the beginning of a tipping point to make more people open up their eyes. I had talked to some of the REIT CEOs about, hey, why don't we think about this? And at first it was like, no way, you're crazy. And then it was like, could be interesting. And that's kind of where it is now. At first they didn't think they thought SFR would be dilutive. And now I think if you really lined up two of the major companies, it'd be a debate as to which one had the more powerful valuation metrics or multiples. How would that exchange ratio work? That'd be interesting, but we're not there yet. So I had a conversation with Don Mullen, who's the next great visionary of this industry that I've been able to get to know, and he has the same power, of that ability to see forward and to organize, resources and people, and assets to fulfill his vision. And we had a conversation that kind of led to that. And I said, oh man, I'm totally with you. I've been waiting for this opportunity. He said, well, would you come work for us? I said, no, I don't want a job. So here I am again. Yeah. No, I really don't want to do this.
Stay out.
So he said, well, how about, a part-time thing? I said, okay, I can probably, woefully underestimated the number of hours a week I would go out. That's my problem, but I'm having fun. So yeah, I'm vice chairman of real estate for Pretium now, which is the top company. And I see the opportunity it is so exciting to onboard, of course, Progress Residential is the largest SFR company now. It happens to be private, but bigger than the publics. And then recently, Pretium purchased a very large apartment management company, BH Management, which has about 100,000 units. So that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
So we see Pretium being the ultimate residential rental, a housing company.
Yeah.
That can allow access for investors to cross those sectors or zero in on one. And we can operate them very efficiently, very effectively, better than anyone, with a master mega platform that allows us to do just that, and also gather incredible, intelligent, strategic data on assets, on the business, on expenses, on trends, on the consumer, and that kind of enables value creation we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
In and among that portfolio. Plus, Pretium has a lending strategy. So, and a home builder lending strategy, and a consumer lending strategy, and a debt trading strategy that plays right into it. So we just see the power of the synergies and the powers of the data And then you always allow for the nuances. And they're just that. They're just nuanced differences.
Yeah.
The biggest difference right now between SFR and multi is just the acquisition workflow.
Yeah.
Instead of acquiring 300 units at a time, or a portfolio of chunks of 300 at a time, is still a lot of one by one.
Right.
But we're seeing more portfolios, more companies. And then again, the bridge is the BTR.
Yes.
In fact, within our process, we're seeing better results managing BTR under the multifamily umbrella versus the single family.
Interesting.
Because lease-ups are the biggest challenge for BTR. Talk to anybody in the BTR business. Once you really get down to it, the lease-up is the rub. It's all about the lease-up.
Specialized skill, right?
Yes, and it's just different. And then you have to gin up early. You have to get pre-leased. You have to market the crazy. You have to build a list of interest, and then you have to whale on, and you have to manage those lease expirations. So very important to know how to do that. And who's better suited than multifamily people who've been doing lease-ups on new development or on major rehabs their entire career.
Yeah.
So it's more akin to that. And then the labor component is kind of a hybrid. So interest. But to your point, the blending of them, I think, is still inevitable. Timing is unknown. But it's not just a one-way, it's converging.
Yeah. Well, and it's smart for the investor side too, because you're expanding the consumer's kind of target age time range, right?
Cradle to grave.
Yeah.
One thing we don't have is a cemetery business or inventory business, but maybe that'll be coming.
Yeah.
Now, some people say, investment theory, let the investor, decide to get diversification in a bundle of stocks. And that's true in a stock portfolio. But it's similar enough. Again, the P&Ls are identical. Yeah, diversification is subtle.
Yeah.
And again, nuanced. So I think an investor could just say, hey, I want US-based residential rental.
Yeah, they're complementary.
Or like, you know what? I really love multifamily. Not a problem. I really love single family and multifamily together. Or you know what? This guy's really, seeing the demographics, wants seniors or student. So we could accommodate that, or just exposure to, that basket. So it's pretty compelling. And again, of the resources, at the top, we can have the absolute best world-class people and systems and resources to come to bear on all of these, management plays, with making it more efficient, not just on the margin, but just all the way through.
Yeah. Well, Fred, thanks for letting me pick your brain. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. It's again, that's my whole life is kind of, fascinating. Whenever I stop and think about it or look back, or I'm asked, but I don't think about that any given day. I just having fun. One thing I learned from Sam Zell: if it ain't fun, we ain't doing it.
I like that motto. Well, one of these is on your part-time role, you make time to write a book about always say.
Oh God, yeah, I don't have the patience for that. I'm just going to burn until there's no more to burn.
Well, thank you again, Fred.
All right, thank you. Enjoyed it.
All right, I know that was a little bit longer than usual, but I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Fred. I sure did. Just great stories to hear, especially being going back a few decades, hearing about the evolution and institutionalization of multifamily and then SFR. Some great stories. I need to get Fred back on again one of these days. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. Thank you again for making us part of your week. We got one more episode coming up, or another episode, I should say, coming up next week. I'll be recapping some of the predictions for 2024, what proved true, what did not, and also teasing out some thoughts on 2025. So join us again next week for the Rent and Roll podcast.